We've been talking about fences, which is more complex than you would realize. So that's also, I think, a little hard to adapt what we need for the newer subdivisions as well as without, having too much impact on the older subdivisions. But it's just an effort to look through it in great detail and come up with, I guess, code that is a little easier to follow and a little easier to manage and also to understand. There's a bit of spaghetti code in there. So we're good on that. But the thing that's important for this group is next week's planning commission meeting. Spencer, you'll be glad to hear this. We made changes to the city code as it relates to heritage. So the heritage component of the city code is in the planning department code. And in 2020, when Spencer and Katie of Northwest Vernacular did our long range preservation plan, they gave us some language updates, recommended language updates. A lot of it's around definitions and just language changes, maybe making it a little simpler, I think, simplifying some things. And then we sent that out to the state and they looked at it. So the planning commission has had the changes to review, and then next Monday, the planning commission will vote on those changes. And then after that, they go to the mayor and the city council. So that's very exciting. So thank you for all your help with that, Spencer, and everybody else. So it's good. That's it for me from a planning commission update. The only other thing that's sort of administrative is just our Zion Memorial Cemetery annual cleaning is Saturday, September 24th. We'll talk a lot more about it. That's the typical what we do the third Saturday of September. And then we'll switch to Northwest Vernacular, and then we have a quick project update for something that Jennifer's been working on that won't take, I don't think, too much time. That'll be a good update.
What time is the
It's usually 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock?
Yeah, 10 to 12. Zion thing, yeah, you'll see a lot more information about it. And I think we mentioned this last meeting, but all of the repair work that we've had grant funding for the cemetery, the historic section of the cemetery, which has 1,700 burials, all that repair work was just finished in June. So all that grant money that we've had the last 5 years. And also Carol was the one that started all that with Baker Prairie Cemetery, and then she finished that and we rolled it over to Zion. So all that work's been done now. So
Is there flyers for this?
yes, we used to do flyers and we quit doing them during the pandemic because nobody was meeting. But yeah, normally we would print flyers and we give them to the Kiwanis and we give them to the Rotary and we put them in store windows and things. Yeah. Of course, we'll all have some. Thank you. All right. So Spencer, sorry to keep you waiting. Thank you, Tyler, for our technical problems. So this is Spencer Howard from Northwest Vernacular, and he and his partner, Katie Pratt.
Right. Yes.
Work together, and they've been working on two projects for us that came out of our certified local government grant from the Oregon Heritage. From the Oregon Heritage Commission. Right. Anyway, so we've had grant money, and then this is two projects that they worked on to do surveys or detailed inventories, if you will, of a big section of the downtown adjacent neighborhood as well as the fairgrounds, the county fairgrounds. So take it away, Spencer.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you so much, everyone, for letting me do this virtually. Let's see, I will share my screen. And are you able to see the presentation?
Yeah, so that I would say the ratio seems to be kind of off. I'm not sure why that would be. Let's see if that's almost
is
like
that better?
Presentation mode. It looks like a there you go. That's good. Perfect.
Great. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I did put it in a PDF just the way things were going. I figured I'd probably better an idea not to try to do the PowerPoint and have things go completely sideways.
Perfect.
So let's see. So yeah, this is the second public meeting for both the Clackamas County Fairgrounds and the Canby Neighborhood Reconnaissance Level Survey projects. Both projects, as Judy mentioned, were funded through certified local government grant from the National Park Service that is transmitted through the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office. So we worked with Jason Allen on the review of and used the state database for entering all of the information. So that all the information from both of these surveys is now on the Oregon Historic Sites database. So it's all up to date and they're online for anyone from the public to be able to go through and see that. So there were two types of surveys, reconnaissance and intensive. This was done at the reconnaissance level. Reconnaissance was selected for both of them because it's really kind of a first look. For the reconnaissance, you want to get in to see, is there enough integrity? Are they intact enough to be able to be eligible under any potential National Register criterion? So it's not necessarily if they're going to be eligible, but do they just have enough integrity to be able to convey historic significance? And then those ones that do, then those are flagged typically as the eligible significant, and then recommended for intensive level survey. And it's in the intensive level where you would do the more in-depth background, owner, really researched data construction, if an architect is known, and really generate that background that could explore National Register eligibility and exactly which criterion the property would be eligible under. So as a reconnaissance, we looked at everything in both of the survey areas and really went through and tried to be very systematic about that. So again, there were two survey areas. The fairgrounds, this was encompassed the full extent of the fairgrounds. You can see the dashed black line that shows the survey area boundary. You can see all of the resources in there that we surveyed. There were 24 primary resources, including building structures and a site. And then there were 7 secondary resources. So this would be like the garage for the single family house, which is, I believe, number 11 on that map. So it won't have its own form, but it's addressed as part of the house form. And so within the area, most of the properties didn't have a specific style. For the neighborhood, the dark black lines show the survey areas. There were 2 kind of separate areas, and the green icons in there show previously surveyed properties that were updated as part of this survey. And then for context, we show on this map the red dots. Those are previously surveyed historic resources that are outside of these 2 survey areas. So you can see where this survey effort really kind of expands your comprehensive coverage of the area directly north of downtown, building out from where you had previously had survey information. And so this included 159 buildings and 1 site. The site was the park, and 91 secondary resources, again, mostly garages and sheds. So, hope the speaking notes. So it seemed easier to kind of present first the fairgrounds and then to talk through the neighborhood survey. So my business partner, Katie Pratt, is a historian as well as an architectural historian. So she researched and wrote up the historic context for the fairgrounds, and I'm going to kind of summarize that just kind of in time for the meeting. But a full context with illustrations is included in the survey report. So if anybody wanted that, it's there and available for public use. Let's see. So kind of as broad background, the history of agricultural fairs in the US dates back to 1810 with the first agricultural fair held in New York. They grew in popularity and spread across the nation with the formation of agricultural societies connecting rural farmers to share practices and resources. The first agricultural society to form in Oregon was in Yamhill County in 1853. Agricultural and livestock fair activities in Clackamas County date back to 1858 with a harvest festival held in Gladstone. The Clackamas County Fair Association was then later incorporated in 1907, and the first Clackamas County Fair held in Gladstone Park that year. Canby quickly petitioned to become permanent host for the fair in 1908 and offered to sell land for the fairgrounds. The current level site with compact and well-drained soil was considered to be ideal for hosting a racetrack and a horse training center. So the current fairgrounds, they moved quickly, opened in 1908, and at that time, stores in Oregon City were closed for the day to allow residents to attend. The earliest buildings were a livestock barn and grandstand and a half-mile graded track for racing. Tents, and you can see in the lower right photograph, were erected for exhibits and concessions. And then campsites were set up in the grove of Douglas firs on the east side of the grounds. And we'll kind of see, and as we go through some of the historic aerials, we'll see where those were and then kind of the reason why they disappeared. By 1910, the site included a baseball diamond. The site was used for races, picnics, band concerts, and holiday celebrations. So really had a wide range of uses. By 1924, the large fair pavilion was built, replacing a former exhibit building and with a viewing balcony looking north. And in 1928, building 23, a new dance pavilion was built in time for the annual fair. By the mid-1920s, horses were wintered at the fairgrounds for winter training using the large barns and racetrack. So the fair continued to operate throughout the 1930s and 1940s, and the fairground had been significantly developed by this period, as you can see from this 1936 aerial. The area shows the area of the North Grove, which is that area just north of the racetrack, just prior to its planting by the Public Works Administration in the late 1930s under the leadership of John Inskeep. So this is a 1944 aerial, and you can see the small little dots from the Grove planting, or from that North Grove planting. This is also a really good aerial to see on the east side. You can see the Grove of Doug firs that was used in the past as the camping area. Campsites were set up in that grove. The fair was suspended during World War II and then resumed in 1946. Horning Hall, building number 26, was constructed as a 4-H dormitory with donated materials and labor between 1944 and 1948. And the machinery building, building 9, later reused as the poultry building, was built in 1949. The fair eventually moved earlier in the year to try to ensure dry, warm weather during the fair. So in 1953, the county commissioners authorized construction of a horse barn, livestock chutes, rodeo arena, reconstructed grandstand, and new bleachers. It was a big kind of redevelopment or infrastructure investment in the fairgrounds. In the spring of 1955, the Capital Journal reported that the longstanding East Grove of trees, which you can still see on the fairgrounds, were infested with bark beetles and were considered a hazard, resulting in their removal by 1960. In 1955, the fairgrounds also added a third livestock ring, a 20-horse barn, which is building number 14, a 60-stall 4-H horse barn, and in 1956, a floral building, which is building number 31. It's over an L-shaped building on the far east side of the grounds. That's not its original location. It used to be slightly further west. The Canby Rodeo began officially at the fairgrounds in 1958 to help boost attendance. The fair grew steadily in popularity, and in 1961, officials extended the fair from 4 to 5 days for the first time. In 1962, building number 27, an arena was built and later named Ellie Arena. And in 1964 and 1968, additions to that building doubled the size of that arena. In this 1963 aerial, you can see the original size of the building prior to the east and the north additions. Additional construction within the fairgrounds included the maintenance building, number 10, and a small barn with animal stalls on the north side, which is building number 15. By the 1970s, the rodeo program was considered one of the biggest draws for the annual fair. Geraldine Jerry Mickelson was hired as a manager for the fair in 1972, and during her tenure, the fairgrounds underwent a number of alterations to enhance and modernize the facilities. This included construction of Clackamas Hall, which is building 19. And by 1976, the fairgrounds were in use for events approximately 70% of the year. This included horse shows, arena events, barrel racing, auctions, and car shows. And in 1978, the main pavilion, building 24, was remodeled with a large new entrance and renovated on the interior. After years of being known as the Canby Fairgrounds, the property name was formally changed to the Clackamas County Fair and Event Center in 2009. So this map shows the buildings that were surveyed and that exist by the development periods that are established in the city's historic plans, historic context. Also, across all the buildings that were surveyed, common alterations included the replacement of original wood windows with vinyl or metal and horizontal sliders, and the replacement or covering up of original wood siding with cement fiberboard siding. And so the recommendations that came out of this reconnaissance level survey were to do an intensive level survey for building 23, built circa 1928, the dance hall, which is shown in the upper left. That building, really of all the buildings remaining, had really quite extraordinary integrity. It's quite a remarkable volume on the interior, and just being able to develop further history and background on that would be helpful, even if National Register designation is not pursued, just for the interpretive value to educate people about that building and its history and role within the fair. The other is to consider heritage tree designation for the North Grove of trees. Those, Katie in her research was able to tie those to the Works Progress Administration for their planting. We don't know why they were planted there, like if there was a replacement for the East Grove. We don't have any background on that. But as part of that heritage tree designation, possibly doing some additional research to see if the reason for why they were planted could be uncovered. In looking through the historic aerials, we were able to confirm that they are those trees that were planted then. You can see there's some loss over time, but basically all the planting patterns stay the same in each aerial. They just get a bigger canopy around each of the trees. The other and last recommendation is for the commission and city to be able to do outreach to Clackamas County and the Fair Board to determine if they might be interested in pursuing National Register listing, and having a conversation around what the implications of that might mean for how they manage and how they work with the buildings. Also being able to, as part of that conversation, get a representative from the State Historic Preservation Office out to walk the site and really dig a little deeper on confirming, this is the potential historic district that we're thinking about. What are the implications, and talking that through to really kind of vet what that could be and what benefits it might be able to bring for the fair and recognition, and in support of any potential grants that they might want to go after to support work or maintenance on the buildings. So those were the three recommendations coming out of this for the fairgrounds. I was going to go on to the neighborhood survey, but are there any questions specific to the fairgrounds right now?
Yeah, go ahead. Is the land that the fairgrounds is on, is that owned by Clackamas County or is it owned by the city of Canby? No, I think it's, I wish Carol was here, she does, let's wait till Carol Palmer gets back, I think it's city property.
No, it's inside the city limits. And it is owned by Fox.
Oh, it is.
And the owner of Fox is not a fair employee here. And board.
Question.
What building is 23 used for? I'm trying to, it looks like the 4.
It's the 4-H building, yeah, currently it's the 4-H.
Yeah, it's like 4 part.
I know, it's an amazing building,
Morning hall, the residence hall.
yes, right, it's right, dorm. Yeah, I think it's funny, the people in this room, you know, we're all, it's in our heads and hearts, and we've all been there many times over the years for different things, and anyway, this gets our heart to pitter pat a little bit.
Well, this was something from, I think 35 years ago. If I recall the story correctly. There's a guy passing through Canby, happened to notice the fairgrounds. Made an offer on it. He offered to buy the fairgrounds. I don't remember at all what he planned to do with it. But the amount of money that he offered was enough to pay off any and all debts. And the idea was there was some land over by the Buckaroo Grounds in Malala. But the cry went up, there's too much tradition. So we saw it. Well, and ironically, it's still zoned as residential.
Right, we talked about that.
Property, so. It's actually a donation fund. Well, zoning is residential. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it, thank you.
Everybody get a new one.
Cool. So jumping just slightly over to the sideways over to the neighborhoods, which abut or adjacent or are adjacent to the Clackamas County Fairgrounds. This map shows the survey areas outlined as the black lines and the underlying plats. And so we wanted to include this slide because they show how much of the survey areas are within the city's original 1870 Canby plat. The other two are a little bit kind of later plats and along the east or the right-hand side. But the majority of the area really is within the original city plat. See. So this map shows the properties that were surveyed on the primary resources by development period. And so that earliest development period, the 1868 to 1892, there was only one resource built during this period. The Doc White house at 410 North Grant Street was built circa 1890. So that was the surveyed. The next development period had 7 resources built. All of those were single family dwellings and really kind of demonstrated Canby's residential growth within the north portion of the city's 1870 plat. And there's also one of those houses that was in the 1892 Lee's edition. The third development from 1910 to 1940, these are the yellow houses, yellow buildings. That was the biggest period. There were biggest. There were 37 resources built during this period. All but 2 were single family dwellings, with the other 2 being a duplex and a religious facility. So they really demonstrated Canby's residential growth from 600 population of 600 in 1910 to nearly 1,000 in 1940. The fourth period, which are kind of the dark red-brown, are from 1941 to 1976. So this kind of picks up World War II and all the post-war growth. There's 70 resources built during this period. Most are single family. There's 2 religious facilities, 1 park, and 12 multiple family dwellings. So they really start to show that shift to a denser population growth within this area. And that has continued through the 1977 to present with 42 resources surveyed from that time period. And most of those were multiple family along with some commercial. So you can really kind of, through those buildings, see how the density kind of grew and expanded out from the downtown core. This map just kind of shows an overview of the property uses within the survey areas. So the kind of blue are single family. There's 112 of those. Multiple family are green, there's 40. In contrast, there's only about 4 commercial and 3 religious resources within the area. So it's still predominantly residential in use. There are 12 architectural styles represented within the survey area. Minimal traditional was the most prominent, followed by craftsman. Most resources did not have a style and were either vernacular or late 20th century buildings with limited stylistic expression. The vernacular resources do have stylistic elements from one or more styles, but in general did not embody a single architectural style. Common forms within the area were ranch and World War II era cottages, which are both predominantly post-World War II housing forms. So that big growth after the World War II, you get a lot of ranch and World War II era cottage forms, as well as the minimal traditional and the late 20th century buildings. Craftsman tends to be the early 1900s, and so pre-World War I generally. So common alterations within the survey area included replacing wood with vinyl or metal horizontal slider windows, the replacement and covering of wood siding with vinyl, aluminum, or cement fiberboard siding. You can see the kind of purple color, the synthetic wood siding is really prevalent within both of the survey areas. Additions to buildings were not that common, at least not as observable from the public right of way. So these 5 resources retain character-defining features and exhibit a high level of design, high artistic value, or appear to be of notable architectural style for the area. So basically, these are some of the most intact and stylistically developed resources within the area. These were the ones that were recommended as eligible significant. And so they would be properties that if property owners were interested, they would be good candidates for conducting intensive level surveys, which would then involve a more detailed background on when the property was built, who lived in it, if there's an architect or a builder associated with it, being able to get inside and understand, has the interior changed much or not? So really kind of a much more in-depth understanding of it. That again would not necessarily lead to National Register designation. That would then be kind of a next step if they were found eligible. But it's something that for property owners can give them a lot more information on the house and the past occupants and really kind of a glimpse into its history. So those were the properties that were recommended as eligible significant. The recommendations was basically to reach out to those property owners and explain to them what the process is and see if there's any interest in that. And that would be a first step of doing the intensive level survey towards National Register designation. So if any of the property owners of an eligible significant property are interested in National Register designation, the first step is doing that intensive level survey. And then out of that, then they would know if they would be eligible for that next step. And ideally have most of the background developed out of that they could then pursue National Register listing if they wanted to. So were there any questions on the neighborhood survey? And also, I forgot to mention too, out of this, we did not see any historic district potential. Just given the extent of alterations in the siding and the windows, that kind of translate, you can kind of see how that pans out in the number of eligible significant properties that were recommended, and those are mostly over in that in the east portion. So there has been a high level of alterations within the survey area.
Trying to remember, is this the fourth reconnaissance survey that we've done in the downtown area? So this is, yeah, one of four. We're getting a lot of coverage now in the whole downtown adjacent neighborhood. So we have very detailed, I mean, the report that goes with this is a picture of every property, every what they call resource, a picture and an assessment of every single property in that area. And so we have that now for, we'll put together a map, I guess, to overlay all of them, but we've got significant coverage now. So that's been really good. Thank you. Help us know what we got, because if once it's gone, it's gone. So, you know, it's good to know. Anything else? Anybody have any other questions? The kind of the next steps is, in fact, it's something Katie and Spencer also finishing up for us, is a frequently asked questions document. So homeowners, if we tell them, hey, you've got a significant property here, we can kind of help them understand and from a layman's term to know, what does that mean, or what can you do, or what might be next. And so as Spencer was saying, that there are a number of properties, just there's 4 in this survey, but more in other surveys that it's been recommended that there's another peel of the onion, another intensive level survey of that particular property. Those are very in-depth, and we do have, how many do we have, Carol? 17, 18. So, and they're not necessarily inexpensive, but we can typically get grant funding, or maybe this is something from a mini grant perspective, but or homeowners, if they elect to, they can pay for them themselves. But it's that next step. If someone wants to register their property, you know, from a historic register perspective, it's that next peeling of the onion that needs to happen on those significant properties. But it's just so nice to know, you know, here's the area we've looked at, and here's, you know, what this means, and here are the properties in this area that you really want to think twice before you know, before something happens to them. But it's up to the property owners, really. But if we're ever looking at zoning changes, or from a planning commission, you know, are we, you know, if this is a really good resource for us to have, to know that, you know, a neighborhood, if we're looking at it from some other change perspective, what's out there that's significant or very meaningful to our town from a heritage or cultural perspective. And as Spencer mentioned, this area is not eligible for a historic district, but there are other areas in our town that are, and that's also something that we can continue to look at. And that can be a block, or it can be a few, you know, it can be businesses, it could be, you know, homeowner homes or whatever. So those are things that we can also pursue. And we've been asked about that from some homeowners in the past. So anything else, Carol, you have something?
I was just gonna add that, one of those houses that they lived in, like one of those homes, yes, is, I believe that's the name. Yeah, and so it has a huge amount of historic significance in terms of the fact that that was a family that owned basically 5 and 9 for years and years, and was part of an important part of the development. So we got some things in that home, and it was absolutely fabulous.
So that maybe is worth mentioning too, because this particular survey, where the reconnaissance survey is, I call it a look-see. You know, they look at every property and they take very specific photographs that go to the state, and also to us. We have them all, but they don't look into the specific cultural history of the home, because they don't know, unless a homeowner might come out and say, hey, what are you looking at my house for? Which they do. But it's not the intent of this one. They didn't say, oh, well, a Knight family member lived there, or, you know, a Lee member or somebody like that. So as Carol was mentioning, they did one of these homes that's very culturally significant to our town because of who lived there and the impact they had on our community. That's what the intensive level survey can do, or does, in addition to looking at much more detail about the property over time. But it also looks into the cultural history of the significance of who lived there. Councilor Parker?
Another thing that from my time being on the fairly, this has elevated the understanding of these buildings, historic buildings. When I was on board, so often it was, these buildings are so old and hard to maintain. Can we just tear them down? So, there was never anything malicious about that. It was just, we were looking at an outcome of how much it costs to heat and cool these buildings, and maintain them. And, in fact, if you take a look at some of the history, well, certainly even the buildings, where you had well-meaning volunteers go in and change these things. Whatever happens with the private businesses, I think that this has elevated the discussion about replacement and repairs. There's have some funds coming towards it, and I think we would be on the roll in the next couple of years. But literally, there were discussions on the board. You know, why can't we tear all these old buildings down and build on it? I hear Carol's stunning problem, like you hear things like that. But you know, I hear for too many historic buildings. That was just the feeling that I mean, all of us have stories from our childhood of my 100-year-old church that the board of trustees could not sell and get rid of it and tear it down fast because it was just such a monstrous thing. So whatever happens with the private residences, certainly the Vegas things, 2 times. But I think that in terms of helping reach that 5% fair forward, move ahead with the street development plans, I think this has been a significant redirect.
Hopefully we can try to get it. Thank you.
I should say reluctantly, I guess I'm okay with the last one. But
The other one fell down, so.
I know, I was doing those things.
We did.
But to come down to the state fairgrounds and all of a sudden livestock barn is gone. I miss that old barn, as leaky as it was. I miss that old barn. I'll never forget the time, was it 1967? I think it was. It poured down rain every day. There was no asphalt or anything like that at that time. I remember my parents watching the show. I was going sheep at that time, inside the barn, under an umbrella. There were puddles in the show ring, and that was really something, but I missed that old barn, I really do. As nice as that new Bud Point Pavilion is, and I knew Bud. I miss that old barn.
We're always faced with I guess the conflict of, making sure that there's something fit for purpose, but that the culture and the history of it is maintained. So that's really tough. I think, do anybody have any other questions for Spencer while we have him? Right.
I was gonna say that I think we have Brian Crow with us, and I kind of put it together as we talked.
Oh.
I think we just lost him, so. But that was, I don't know if we have, he's the current executive director with Pakistan Fairhouse.
Okay.
So we have, I think that was issues.
So we had somebody on Zoom that we just figured out, someone that's a very,
That was PC.
I think that was.
well, we don't know, PC, you know how Zoom is. Okay, well, Spencer, thank you so much, and thank Katie too. This work, we have the very detailed reports. They're quite large, but happy to share them. It's hard to send them out big, but that's okay. And then the city maintains all of those, so we have all of the reconnaissance surveys that have been done to date, all the details. So thank you very much for your efforts and for your presentation tonight. It was excellent as usual. Great doing business with you, and anything you have for us, anything else, parting words?
No, I think that was everything. No, just thank you so much for your time, and yeah, it was really a delight to work on. Both those areas were a lot of fun to survey, and the fairgrounds especially, and the fair staff were absolutely amazing. They let us basically just have the run of the place to be able to go through to do the survey work. So they were absolutely wonderful. So, but thank you all very much.
Thank you for your patience with our technical challenges.
No.
We'll talk to
No
you
problem.
soon. Okay, thank you, bye.
Bye.
Oh, interesting. Okay, we only have one other specific project update on our agenda, and this is something Jennifer Gillard is going to talk about briefly.
Yes, very briefly.
We're down behind the
I know
scenes.
we're up on time here. So, I don't know if you remember, back in the days, the binder that we talked about that had all of the, photocopied, there's 63 sites that it had in Candy that are kind of spread out. Some of them-
These surveys were done, specific surveys of specific property.
Right. Okay, so the first one is the cultural resource inventory form, which was done in the early 80s. And then, with these, it has, some additional information that was done, I believe, by the county. I'm working with Peggy Sidler on this now, and it had historical significance. So the background of the house, who lived there, what they knew, and this went from the early 90s. I think she said the last iteration of that was 2000. So in each of those, it has that information, and there's photos in there.
Lots of paper.
Big. The third component of that is for handwritten notes. In pen, in red pen on the papers. Now, I was able to talk to her by email this week. She said that that is the only place those are written, and those are based on oral history that she has for people. So, and she said they're not verified, but that is her notes from, years ago on that. So the question is what do we do with this? It came to light a couple of weeks ago because there was a gal that lives in a house on Township on Facebook. She said, I really want to know about my house. I have to.
Saw our post about this
Saw our
meeting and
post.
said, hey, what about my place?
I said, and I happened to have been in that house when I was growing up, a friend of the family that lived there, so I know exactly which house. And I went on to the SHPO, Historic Site Database, nothing on there besides the inventory form that it's 1984. Okay, so that got me all riled up. So I was like, okay, I went into CMAP on the county, looked, no documentation there. So I thought, go look in that binder that I have in my house. It's just kind of been sitting there and gelling. All the information you would ever want to know on the house. Which brings the question, is it important? That binder it's pretty important, not only for the handwritten notes, but it kind of gives us a guide map on the fact that we're gonna have to track down if all of that information is in a hard copy somewhere, in binder somewhere, or is it uploaded in digital form?
We were expecting to find electronic.
Yes.
In the county.
Oh, well, I was expecting to find it on the
State.
SHPO in the state, because, and so
That's where it belongs. That's where it
that's
should be.
where it should live. So now, for example, if you have a house that you want to know about, you should be able to go there, see if it's on there and find out the information. So, according to Peggy Sigler, potentially that information lives at the county planning library in binders. Hopefully, it has not been thrown away or destroyed. So, next, this is just in its infancy.
And where's those binders saved?
Well, she had it all inventoried apparently, and due to this email I got today, in Microsoft Access, remember that on the olden days? She kept a copy of it, very smart, so she has that, but there was also a flood at the Abernathy location, and that some of the binders were damaged, water damage, and they were supposed to try and recover that and scan things, but a lot of the original photographs were lost. So I really, now, part of my thought process on this is to make a field trip to the county, see what's left, and see, going back, apparently, we supposed to actually digitize some too, but some got it. So, so this is where we're at right now. So, I'm gonna, work to try and find out where this information is, so we can get it all in one place. So if folks want to know, and it's important for us too as well, to know the history of these homes, and buildings, some of them are commercial as well. So to find out, if we can have that, information, because a lot of it is who lived there. You know, what their business was, who built I mean, it's a lot of, it's really, really crucial historical information that I would hate to have to go invent the wheel and try and find, and maybe it can be done. It might be information that's. So anyway, that's the short.
We're trying to figure out how big a project we have on our hands.
It might be very,
And, then we've talked about grant money, so we'll be talking to the state, but anyway.
yes. So we're in the infancy of it now. Hopefully by the next time we meet, I'll be able to give an update, we might be able to get a roadmap of what we want to do and how we will go about this. So,
I think that's terrific work. Summary on the double. New releases of history books with, new information about presidents and other things that have been discovered because somebody by fluke just happened to say this. And I think of the number of ways that this can be used for example, somebody wanted to do a biography on one of the leading builders. We don't know because this generation of caretakers what somebody in the future is going to want. I wish we could try and say as much for knowing necessarily.
Yes.
We live on Baker. And our neighborhood was built up in the 70s. Our house was started in the early 1900s. And one of our elderly neighbors passed away a couple months ago. And at the estate sale, the people that were doing it had reams. I mean, there must have been 30, 40 albums of the family. And he was in his 90s, his son was in his 70s from Oklahoma. They didn't want any of it. So I, as a neighbor, we took maybe, 20 of the albums, took them home, went through them, and this is of the house being built in the early 70s, okay? And it broke my heart because this is what the estate ultimately said, they'll just go in a dumpster and you take them. There was an entire cover full of these albums. And I know that it would be really helpful, like, I listened to what you say and I just feel sadness, okay, Dorothy Knight was our neighbor. And so I think it would be so wonderful if there was a place that you could just take stuff, like I pulled some of the pictures when some of the early building of the houses, it was a subdivision on Baker, that is right on the river, when those houses were being built. And to give them, to whoever bought the house, the sale is pending now of these new people, whoever that is. But it would be, I would have taken more out and just given it to some kind of a holding place, maybe it's for the historic, I don't know what it is. I know that, who has room in their cupboard, and sad for a dumpster. It happens every week.
Families that move out of town, the parents can't live in Candy, they're not playing, selling the house. They've got pictures, they have.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I just think that would be something, and we've been in our house like 36 years, so we have quite a bit of anecdotal history and stuff of old days of art, and we have our own history of what's in the ground. But it would just be so nice to have a place where that stuff, and you could just tell people, take the outlines, and then somebody that has maybe a project for somebody with money now. I don't know, but something.
Well, you've given me a great idea because we've had a number of. But this is something Carol and I talked about years ago that we were just imagining every day across this county, people, my generation and the next, are moving on to our next phase, whatever that's going to be. And I just imagine my kids going through some of my photos. And it's funny, our conversation is, can you imagine somebody who has a house and then there's these documents, that sort of thing. Now, at the time and at this current, we don't have anything going. But if this committee came out with a recommendation to the city council saying, here's what we see, here's an example of this. Could we find a place at the public works complex that is dry and humidity controlled, and we can at least store them? I have an entire collection of Candy Herald volumes that can't find a home because even enough room in our library. And I'm working through the process of saying, can we at least store them? Now, the drawback everybody says is, well, public works is a gated area because of security and people can't go in. Okay, well, maybe if we can have a hole, we at least have an apple where people can drop these things off, and at some point in the future, at least we have preserved the sort of documents. And so, I'll leave this up to the committee because, the city council is extraordinary in how it responds, to the bicycle. That they come up and they say, we want this done, and the council says, okay, you can do it. But, thank you. This is, happens every day. Yes, I think, working right at the sale. Her family, great people. But they're living in Washington. Sold them out, sold all their furnishings, everything else. Have no idea what happened. I know where we have volumes of historical stuff, on candy, that went back many generations. Where did that go?
Well, and you know, she was, you got, and Buford was her husband, and so, again, there was that, and that was gone, and then people. Maybe some of you are from California, but they bought a house, and that's they don't have that history, right, it just doesn't make any choice. They children.
But I'll work on the internal end of finding a vault for these things. And the commission wants to noodle around what sort of program advertising. I'm sorry, I can't come up with something that isn't describing this, but it reminds me of the Leave a Baby program that the police department.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a box of them. I've got a box of 100-year-old clothing. I don't have a place to store it. Until we can get a grant for an archivist to come in and do this sort of thing. I don't think the historic society has unlimited limits to store these things. But we do have some buildings out of so I'll pursue that. You guys pursue a resolution, and because what I'd like to do is turn on the program that as people pass on of children and relatives and neighbors know about this program. The thing that's always talked to in the past is, well, what are we going to do about it? And I'm getting to the point now where I don't care, I don't have an answer. We'll let somebody else in the future figure it out. In the meantime, we'll keep this. So thank you for coming here. That's kind of recharging me. Good work, and that is.
Well, then again, the remodeling of houses, we have to show the house when we bought it in 1986. And, I was worked, anyway, people came, they lived in the house, raised their children in the 60s. And, of course, Dan's complaining about a ceiling that's been dropped, and who did this and everything. And Sylvia says, well, Walter, didn't you drop that ceiling? And so all the different remodelings, and then when we got into the understructure of them, they had told us 5 barns had been torn down, and our house was built with 5 barns. And indeed, we found all on the inside, and our house is solid boards on the outside, solid brick on the inside. And we kept some of the rooms that are just the regular, just board. So I mean, but you gotta live in the house, and so when you talk about windows and replacements and heating, all of that, you know, it's a challenge. with these things.
This is, we got no one night bed.
Oh, come on. Yeah.
No one likes slept there.
Somebody did.
I got the bed that we could be in your house.
Anyway.
We'll talk about it, we'll also touch base with Nora, like, Vertical Society, but
But
and we
you
also.
don't have endless capacity.
Right.
Oh, I didn't want to step on your toes. If you want all this, you can have it.
And we also, we've had so many contacts with the state, we can touch base with what other cities are doing. Maybe they've got some ideas for it too.
Well-
Everyone's got the same challenge.
For me, I just feel like, we need to get the word out in some way as part of our public outreach to get people interested in that. They, I've thought about it. I mean, that's, you can go down a rabbit hole for days, sure, like researching, I know I have. But
We have an official repository, then we have, okay, so now.
or if we put the bug, in people's, bonnet, I guess you could say, and just to say, I live in an old house. I wonder what the history is, and oh my gosh, I have boxes of old photos, like, I mean, not everything's gonna be significant, but, not just so people might think about it.
For central number, I'm thinking back, was it 3 or 4 years ago, someone moved into the home in Candy and found what they called cemetery blueprints. And they called the city and the city said, how did you get your roach? And I'm like, oh, guess what, they're still in my house.
I just imagine people going up in their attics and going through everything.
Well, cemetery, yeah, okay.
So, I mean,
That was the only one that just.
No, there's another, we thought so,
Somebody stumbled.
I'm sure, but I can't.
well, once it's gone, and a lot of this would have to be.
I had never seen them, and that's what blew me away, because I rolled them in my living room. Like, oh my God. Then I found them. Anyway.
Anyway, so that's hopefully, next time we meet, I'll be able to have a look. We can maybe
All right, everyone, anything else for the good order?
Oh, I should make.
Oh, she also said something, Charlie.
Yes, I would just like to mention that even though our very historic society is not in the city, we are a part of the Candy community. And we're trying to educate everybody that we're out there. And I think you probably all know, and it's now restoring that happy schoolhouse. But it's like, we want people to know about this, and I can't believe that there are people that never heard of Markbury School. And it used to be the Kansas School District, and it is historical. And when we're finished with it, and hopefully the next year, because Henry just hired him to work with us. And they are really excited about this project. So, the newest, as of today, the classes have, the plans process have been completed for the county permits and submitted. So, they're telling us that they're gonna have completing work by winter. So, this is our first home. So, if you guys can just keep spreading the word that when we're done, it's there for community use, because it always has been 4-H, for scouts, community meetings, yeah. So,
Thank you for that update. Yeah, fortunately, Judy, because of my relationship with you and also because I live right by Mark Prairie School, these guys, it's in our heads and hearts all the time.
Oh, good.
They hear about it, they're like, oh, Judy with a Mark Prairie.
Yeah.
But thank you for that update, that was really good.
A little.
Thank you.
Really. Brad just.
We did? Oh.
That was see what they've done and the things that they.
Is that Jennifer Burns? That's where you got it?
Yes.
When she got off the murder trial?
Yeah.
She was a jurist. Yeah, we have a picture for Jennifer, she's so good to work with.
But the museum is a great.
Thank you. Marina lives in amazing. What's the year your house was built?
1895.
In Aurora.
And then
When she runs air conditioning, what do you have to do? The roof, the cap
Oh,
on
yeah,
the roof?
basically, I mean, cap off the roof every summer and.
That's their fear, baby.
It's really hot. We did put a window piece in the, kind of thing.
She's probably living in sort of.
So I think. So the dog can survive. It's the air.
I have some anything close to the corner view.
You gotta get on Instagram, the house has its own, Instagram. Yeah.
Thank you,
I'll
Angie.
cross this out. Car show? Yeah, tomorrow, whatever that is. Oregon Trail Fish Farms are being in Charlie Berkeley,
Yes.
car show. We will also be at River Colony on the 13th.
I get extra ice cream.
A little bit of